What is up, everyone? We are back with the top 5 new brews. This is deck number 3. We got 2 more to go on our way to number 1 new deck, and this one is a green deck. This is honestly almost like a historic level power level deck in standard, so we'll have to see how well it does. I mean, the meta is different in standard rather than older formats. Older formats tend to have like small creatures that are quite powerful. So the format is different, and that might change things a little bit. But yeah, let's talk about it. So this one, I'm calling it Turbo Elves because it's just like the classic historic or timeless elf deck, where your goal is to ramp up, get as many elves as you can, use that to get some big payoff finisher, and then swing in with all your elves being like +3 bigger than they were originally, or +5 or something, and you just crush the opponent in one swing. So let's talk about our 1-drops. And so we have Llanowar Elves coming back. That's huge. It's a super good 1-drop ramp elf. Taps and just gives you mana straight up. We also still have Citadel Stalwart. It's a green elf that you tap another artifact or creature to add a mana. So by itself, not so good, but if you get any other elves down, then you can start ramping. And then probably the worst of these 1-drops is the Rustifying Cultivator, which takes 2 turns to get you ramp. Like, you store up a charge, and then you can spend that charge to ramp you. So pretty slow, but the main, I mean, having the ramp on the right turn is still helpful, but also the main thing is it's a 1-drop elf in green, which we need to have a lot of 1-drops to help with our other card synergies. So that's the main reason we're running this one. If I could put something else there, I might do it, but having the 1-drop elf is pretty important. So yeah, you might be able to cut one. We'll see. In the 2 mana slot, we got wait. I always say this one wrong too. Dwayne's Elite. It's 1 and a green, 2/2. When this enters, if you control another elf, create a 1/1 green elf warrior token. So if you have an elf that you played on turn 1, which is what we just discussed, then you get an extra 1/1 token. And I know it doesn't seem like much, but it's actually very powerful. And in the older formats, this is one of the best 2-drop elves in those formats. Just getting your board to go wide on turn 2. Having 3 elves on turn 2 is huge. It really sets you up for all of your pump spells that are going to come later, especially as you'll see the Elvish Archdruid is very good with this. So you play turn 1, 1-drop, and you play Dwayne's Elite on turn 2. You get your board going wide. And then you can also play something like Leaf Crown Visionary, which is 2 mana. Whenever you cast an elf spell, you can pay a green, and if you do, you draw a card, and other elves get +1/+1. So you start to go wide, and then you start to pump your creatures up. And there weren't a lot of other very good elf 2-drops. There were some other pretty good ones, but I opted instead to go with a protection spell here in at the 2 mana slot. There's some decent 1 mana protection spells, but I really liked that this one gives +3/+3 trample, indestructible, and hexproof, because in the early games, you know, if we have our Steward down or our Llanowar Elf, we're going to have just a 1/1 creature, but it does have some additional mana that you get to cast from those. So kind of a play pattern you could do is hold up some mana, maybe turn 3, who knows. You play a 2-drop and you hold up your elf with your 3rd land, so you have 2 mana open. The opponent swings in with their red, Monastery Swiftspear or whatever, thinking you just got a 1/1 and they can get through it. You block it, you pump it up, you make your Llanowar Elf into a 4/4 that is also indestructible and hexproof, so they can't easily kill it, and you probably kill their creature instead. And indestructible also means that they can't trample through you with the extra damage either. So very would be very good combat trick against the more aggressive decks, and that's why I went with this one instead. But you know, even against control, having the indestructible and hexproof is pretty big because especially our 3-drops, we really want to protect a lot of our 3-drops. So if they try to use target removal, it gets hexproof. If they use a board wipe, you can still give your 3-drop the indestructible so it doesn't die. I guess the main one we'd have to worry about is Sunfall. Still in the format right now, right? Still pretty annoying, but I would say Sunfall is less popular than it used to be. So unless everyone just starts playing Sunfall decks again, you're probably going to be okay. And there's a new Day of Judgment card that a lot of control players might start playing. So maybe that will make it so Sunfall is less popular. We'll see. All right. And then if we go to the 3-mana slot, this is where the big powerhouses come in Elves. We got Elvish Archdruid. All your other elves get +1/+1. So it's an Elf Lord. And it also has this second ability, which is super broken. Add a green mana for each elf that you control. So in older formats, basically if this card untaps, then the opponent loses the game and you win the game. So a normal play pattern in Historic or Timeless, Llanowar Elves, Dwayne's Elite, maybe play another 1-drop. So now you've got 4 elves on the battlefield. Turn 3, you play the Elvish Archdruid, and then you hope it survives. And then if it survives, you untap and you get 5 mana for free. You cast some big thing, or you just fill your board even more, or you use some creature's pump effect, and you just win the game. So that's often how it goes. Another play pattern, Llanowar Elves on turn 1, and then turn 2, you play Elvish Archdruid immediately. That's another play pattern. So we'll see if it's as effective in Standard. I think Standard people do play a little bit more removal than they might in older formats. Like in older formats, people try to get away with only playing Fatal Push, which is another reason why Archdruid is so good. So we'll see. We'll see how it works in Standard, but we don't just have the 1 3-drop that's good, so you'll have to make them waste all of their removal. We also have Imperious Perfect. This is another really good 3-drop from Historic and Timeless. 3 mana, 2/2, pumps all your elves, and you get to spend your excess mana by creating 1/1 elf creature tokens. So the payoff and an enabler, I guess, essentially, because you're making an elf every turn. And then we got this new one from Foundations, Adaptive Automaton. Maybe it's an old card, it probably is, but it's basically a flexible card to go in your tribal decks. 3 mana Lord for any tribal card. Just you pick a type, so you pick Elf, and then it's a 2/2 that gives all your other elves +1/+1. So we really have so many lords in this deck, 4, 8, 12, 14. So most of the time, if you can get probably 2 of your lords down, your board's going to be so huge that the opponent's going to be on the back foot. Unless you're playing against like some sort of mid-range where they have some decent creatures and a lot of removal, then you're probably going to win from that. And at least that's the hope. That's what you're going to try. So that's what we're going for. There is even more lords than this for elves. There's a 4 mana lord. There might even be 2 4 mana lords. I'm thinking about it, but since 4 mana is a little bit expensive, I opted for Adaptive Automaton. Basically the same thing, and it's 1 mana cheaper. So the last 3-drop we got, Tyvar the Pummeler. This is 3 mana for a 3/3 that you can tap an untapped creature to give it indestructible. And it also has a second ability that for 5 mana pumps all of your creatures with +X/+X, which is the greatest power among creatures you control. So as you've got more Lord cards, like Leaf Crown Visionary, if this becomes a 4/4, you're going to pump everything with +4/+4, or +4/+5/+5. So it's a very good finisher type effect. And because of that, we may end up wanting to play a third one. But it is legendary, so you don't want to play too many. But I'm starting out with 2. We'll see if we want to bump it up to 3. And then finally, one of the biggest new cards in the set, Banner of Kinship. This card is very good, and it's 5 mana, a little bit expensive, but it's essentially like a super anthem. Excuse me. Because for each creature of that type that you have on the battlefield when you play it, it's going to put counters on this artifact, and then your creatures get +1/+1 for each counter on this artifact. So obviously it's bad on an empty board, which would be bad. So if the format is just like all sweepers all the time, you probably can't play this card. And you may have to end up playing some more like indestructible effects or something like that. But with the meta that it is now, where it is mostly like aggro decks, mid-range decks, tempo decks, this is a card that is pretty powerful. I mean, it's really, really powerful, to be honest, unless the opponent is just sweeping your board all the time. So let's say normal play pattern, Llanowar Elf, either Elvish Archdruid on 3 or Dwayne's Elite. Even if you get, Steward on 1 and then Dwayne's Elite, you're pretty happy there. You got 3 Elves, and you can start to tap this for an extra mana. So then your turn 3, you play another one of your Lord creatures. Everything's getting bigger. Opponent's going to focus on removing your Lord creature most likely. And so by the time you get to 5 mana, which is your turn 4, you still have about 3 creatures on the battlefield. So you play this on turn 4 with your 3 creatures. Now everything on your battlefield gets +3/+3. And the other really big thing is the counters stay on this artifact. So let's say you get this off, because this is what happens in Control a lot, right? Like you play some anthems, they wipe the board, and then you're like, okay, well, now my anthems are kind of useless because I'm only giving it +1/+1, but I have no creatures, and you feel bad. But because this one gives like +3/+3, or however many creatures you had, maybe at worst it's probably going to be a +2/+2. But either way, let's say it's +3/+3 on average. Then they wipe the board. You're feeling sad, but if you can just play any elf card in your deck, it now becomes a threat, because even a Llanowar Elf or Rustifying Cultivator with +3/+3 is going to be a 4/4, 4/5, whatever. It's going to be big. So basically, once you get this card down, anytime you play a creature, it's a must remove. And it also is going to be annoying for the mono red deck, because you've turned all your creatures into things that they can't get through. Like most of the time 4/4 is big enough that the mono red player cannot attack, or they have to waste all their spells in their hand to attack. So really makes everything a huge threat for the opponent and annoying to deal with. And on top of that, we got a new land, Soulstone Sanctuary, which is kind of like Faceless Haven, where it becomes a 3/3 creature with vigilance and all creature types. So you have this banner for your elves with +3/+3. If you have a Soulstone Sanctuary, you make it a creature. Now you've got a 6/6 with vigilance. So yeah, I mean, it's like against control, even if they wipe your board after you get the banner down, then you're still going to have this land swinging in with massive, massive damage. So it doesn't even matter. So I think that's why it's good. And of course, we talked about how there's some indestructible with Tyvar, with Overprotect, to kind of hopefully negate some of the sweeper effects anyway. I think like the only you know, the only danger scenario that you want to try your best to avoid is like, you know, you have turn 1, turn 2, turn 3, you play this. If the opponent goes first, you know, they could potentially have a sweeper on turn 4 with the new Day of Judgment. So if you're playing like blue-white control and you're thinking, okay, they might sweep the board next time, maybe try to make sure you still have some cards in your hand that you can play with the banner. But if you're on the play, basically there's nothing that they can do, right? Because on your turn 4, when you can cast it, it's only turn 3 for your opponent, and there's no way they can stop you. So you'll be pretty set once you get the banner down. All right. Sorry, we went a little bit long this time, but that is the Elf deck. That's deck number 3 of the top 5 new brews. Let me know what you think. Will Elves be a thing in standard like it is in older formats? Um, yeah, let me know your thoughts. Till next time, have a blessed day and see ya.